Hello, I'm the Geeky Blonde Reviewer, and welcome back to my playthrough of Kerbal Space Program .19. This is the final result of my rocket. I have fixed the staging, I have strutted everything together with an inch of its life. You may note yourself, it looks like a giant spider web in some places, but it is only to guarantee it will not explode, break apart, self-destruct, whatever. It is going to remain intact on the launch pad and so forth. Ugh. Let's test if this thing flies. Ugh. Now, I will admit, unlike NASA, this is definitely a little bit more of a forward-leaping step. But then again, I am a bit of a pro at this game. But talking about NASA, there's a lot of NASA. Oops. There's a lot of the NASA rockets, which a lot of people don't take enough time to look at. Now, at Kerbal Space Program, everything looks hideous. I mean, ugh. There's no fuselages. You can't paint anything. But when you break down what a rocket looks like, ignore all that fancy fuselages for everything. In theory, just place a few metal chunks and you could make a rocket look identical to the Saturn V, the Titan rocket for the Gemini missions, or even a possibility, the Atlas rocket that took America into orbit during Mercury. The only difference is, Kerbal Space Program, you don't have those giant fuselages to hide all the single fuel tanks and everything. I mean, there's just a lot of things that Kerbal Space Program lacks. It still lacks in .23 and potentially in .24. Wouldn't shock me. But, so you can't really hold anything against Kerbal Space Program just because of the way everything looks. Which, talking about looks, look at the launch clamps. They're so old that they haven't even implemented the look-through texture yet. They're just blocks. Well, let's just hope those blocks get us to the moon. Oops. Alright, throttling up. Alright. Should be enough power, if not too much. And throttle up. Yes, we've got liftoff. Gotta throttle down a little bit because that is too much thrust. Vertical speed gauge jumping all over the place. We've cleared the tower! Yes! We have success! Bit of a bumpy start, but we are going to the moon. Yeah! That never stopped us. Don't mind the overheat, it should cool its tits before it should start slowing down before it hits max. Alright, now we're in the air. At about 20 meters per second-ish. Increasing. Oh, the old textures, the old vehicle assembly building. The old tracking station, the old space plane hangar. Without anything else, just a hangar and that's it. Oh gosh. This is very nostalgic. This is the first version I ever actually played. And it was an amazing game. It literally was everything I asked for. But enough of that. As I said, if you break down NASA rockets, since that has higher priority in my mind, but as I keep trying to get to, NASA rockets, when you break them down and you look at them, the Saturn V, if you look at it, aside from the actual decals of the U.S. flag emblem, and that's pretty much like the only notable thing is the NASA and the flag emblem. But if you remove that, the whole rocket is just a bunch of stripes. There are stripes above and side, up and down, and all this other stuff. It looks like it's at random parts. But when you really look at the rocket, and you were to look at its design, each and every one of the stripes just happened to be next to where the rocket would decouple. That's because a stripe represents where a stage ends. Because I don't even need to pull up a picture, and I can already tell you that that is true. I can tell you that NASA planned it. They're genius. They're rocket scientists. Rocket geniuses. Somebody should put that on a t-shirt. But yeah, NASA knew what they were doing, so in order to help themselves know, well, where does this part go? They just put stage markers, painted it a certain way. So, naturally, it's not too hard to figure out when you look at it. So the next time you go to Kennedy Space Center, or even just, around the block, and you just happen to open up your phone or see a Saturn V rocket flying overhead, whatever, and you see those marks and you're still wondering what the heck they are, hopefully now you know that they're not just any random image, but rather, in fact, oops, dropped my mic, but where in fact the staging is, it's actually quite self-explanatory. But if now, it isn't just true for the Saturn V. If you were to look at, for example, the Mercury Redstone, if you were to pull that up, if you were to look at it, there are a lot of black and white stuff on the tail. Incidental, that tells them where to attach the tail, or the engine stuff. And if you look at the top, there are a lot of black and white stripes right below the capsule. Again, self-explanatory. And right in the middle of the Mercury Redstone is one black stripe, like a long diameter. That, I believe, represents where the oxidizer and the liquid fuel are separated. Everything above the stripe is oxidized, and everything below is liquid fuel, or vice versa. I'm not a super tech on it, but that's what I believe. Now, but to continue on about the Mercury, interesting enough, if you were to look at any launch sequence of the Mercuries, you'll notice that the Mercuries tend to have free launch, meaning they don't need a launch tower like the Saturn V, the Titan, or the Atlas. Either of the Atlas rockets need it. And that's because it was a single rocket booster. It was a single rocket. Instead of having two or three, building into it, it had one. And because there was only one, instead of having to wait for the other ones to warm up, heat up, and get to max power at the same time, because each one's going to get there at separate times, since no rocket is exactly the same. So in order to allow the rockets to warm up and do what they needed to at about the same time, what they did is that they put the launch clamp. The launch clamp allowed for all the rockets to warm up and get to their max power, and then you would decouple. The rocket would go on its own power, and by that time, it was already at max power, ready to go. This is actually something the Saturn V, the Saturn V, the Saturn 1B, and the Atlas Agena, the Titan rockets all used, except for the Mercury Redstone, because it was only one engine, and it really didn't need anything. However, talking about the Saturn V, this kind of looks at when you take a look out from the outside. It has one really big external stage, bottom stage, followed by a smaller version of it, with the same setup of a bottom stage, with a perfectly honest, there were never one version of the Saturn V. Hence why it was the Saturn V. There were a lot of Saturn rockets that were never used. The Saturn C, I can't remember the exact title. It's Saturn some. But it was basically a different version of the same rocket. The Saturn Nova. The difference between the Saturn V and the Saturn Nova was that the Saturn Nova was going to have a much larger base, be much fatter, and have a few more additional stages. Well, actually, it's going to be the exact identical rocket, just a little bit more fuel, more power on the first stage. But what the Saturn Nova would do, rather than what the Saturn V would do, is that the Saturn Nova would actually go to Mars. He was going to be the first launch vehicle to take man to Mars. Kind of drifting on center here, but he would be the first vehicle to take man to Mars instead of the Mars Direct or the Ares 5 and everything else we were planning today. But that was our original plan, but we scrapped it. But it's not the first Saturn rocket plan we've ever scrapped because it was infeasible or just illogical. Alright, here we go. Decouple. Waving no fire. There we go. Besides, I'm going to make a slight orbital insertion. Oh gosh, oh gosh, oh gosh, oh gosh. SAS me. Okay, hold on. Stop moving. SAS. There we go. Alright. Now we're getting ourselves up to altitude. However, we've achieved quite a lot this flight, but I must call it an end. So, this is the end of this episode. We'll pick it up in the next. So, geek out.